So I want to talk to everyone about what autism is not. And I think that some of the things here, it's just a short list and we could add to it, but it's really important that we spend a little time on the list and why this is not autism. So, and I think, Lisa, I want to remind people that this list, wouldn't you say, would actually surprise a lot of parents and even some professionals?
Well, most definitely, because this list is largely what is listed in the DSM-V. It is largely what is included when I've read multiple psychological assessments about how the children present, the behaviors that they present, and not to say that all children, but this is the kind of thing that is, it's the behavior, it's the symptoms of the autism that often get focused on.
Yeah, and as you look at the list, what we want to note, and we can look at the lack of speech, of course, the famous one, I call it the famous one, the lack of eye contact, behavior problems, self-stimulatory behavior, academic delays, annoying habits or rituals. And sometimes annoying habits or rituals can actually be really, really painful in the individual who has them. Not liking other people, wanting to be alone. If this is what people in the world, which is a really significant number of people, think autism is, what does it mean for how they treat the children, Lisa? Because if you think about it, if you think, for instance, having autism means you don't like to be with other people, what would that cause people to do? I've seen people with children, once they knew a diagnosis, go, oh, I won't go near them. I won't, I'll just stay away. Well-meaning family members with children. It's pretty painful, actually.
Well, I feel that so often the children aren't treated like children any longer, and they're treated. I don't even know how to describe it. I was just in a school, unfortunately, about a month ago, and the way that the school staff was treating the child, they were talking in front of him like he was an object in a sense, and talking about him like he had no feelings or thoughts, or that he couldn't hear them. And it was quite concerning to me.
And I've seen this circumstance too, and a child or young adult get upset and everybody go, for no rhyme or reason, he or she got upset. Mm-hmm. You're like, well, you were just talking about them unfavorably in front of them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't like it if somebody talked unfavorably in front of me as if I were the wall, right?
Right.
Yeah. I actually don't like it if it's favorable, particularly if I'm not included in, So I think it's a really important thing. And a lot of times I think well-meaning people don't know that every one of these on these lists, lack of speech or lack of eye contact or behavior problems or self-stimulatory behavior, they're not specific to autism. Okay. These that we've listed here, people with other diagnoses and other things in their life, or no diagnoses, but just other things in their life, have these traits, some of them. You can have a speech delay and not have a diagnosis of autism. You can have self-stimulatory behavior. In fact, all of us self-stim to some degree, Lisa, even if we don't admit it. I am right now. I'm doing my hands like this, but you can't tell, in my lap. Actually, self-stimulatory behavior is kind of part of being human, though some people do it more than others.
Right.
I think that's really important, don't you?
Oh, most definitely. And it's interesting too, because prior to learning about RDI, I understood that autism was a collection of behaviors that we needed to extinguish, and it was a collection of typical type of behaviors that we needed to reinforce. And if we could just do that, then my child would be typical. And we actually did do that. My son learned that he needed to raise his hand if he wanted to speak in the classroom. He never did. He never did initiate, but he knew that rule. He knew his colors and letters and numbers, and he could speak in 9-word sentences by age 5, but he did not have reciprocal, meaningful conversations. So he actually had speech, but he could not communicate. And on the contrary, I've had children on my caseload before that were considered nonverbal because they had apraxia, and yet they were highly communicative. And they also had wonderful eye contact. So, I guess, again, when we're looking at what autism is and what it isn't, I think the most important thing that we really fully understand is the way that their minds are working, and to look at the latest research about autism. And this list here is a collection of symptoms that some children possess and some don't, and some people possess that don't have autism and some do. So it's a collection of symptoms or behaviors that can be part or can be a trait that somebody with autism may also possess.
And I think adding on to that we have to be very careful if we automatically think somebody diagnosed with autism doesn't like being around other people and begin to ostracize them or leave them out. For example, my son is highly social. He loves people, and he really always has. But I saw people keep their distance from him because they knew his diagnosis. And I know that had an effect on him, even well-meaning family members. Oh, I just didn't think he'd want to talk to me. So, as we say, being human beings, they're little human beings, and they have the same desires and the same wants and the same hopes that we have. Even if they can't articulate that, that's inside us as people. And so definitely, Lisa, I wanted to say before we moved on that we're not here to say that if your child has a severe speech delay or an academic delay that they might not need assistance with that. We're definitely not. But what we're saying is that is not in itself autism.
Good point.
Sometimes people misunderstand that because, of course, if I have a speech delay or I have a behavior issue, I'm just saying any person, that needs to be addressed. Absolutely.
Well, it does, but it's also it's good to know that even if you address that, it doesn't mean that the autism will go away either. And so often families just want their children to speak, but I can tell you that I've worked with enough families where that they would also like their children are maybe what we would call hyperverbal, where they're talking too much, but they're not really communicating. They're doing a lot of scripting, and so that's not meaningful either. So I guess it's just good to know what it is that you really ultimately want for your child for their long-term quality of life. And it also is helpful to think about that in terms of whether or not your parenting style is, sometimes it's hard to know, but whether you're being reactive or proactive. And sometimes if we get overly focused on, maybe stimulatory behavior or behavioral problems or things like that, that we're not really helping lay down the foundation so that the child can develop greater self-awareness and can help, they can start to be able to manage that kind of thing on their own.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
So it comes down to understanding the children. And Dr. Gutstein says, the loss of the guiding relationship is what uniquely defines children with autism. So that guiding relationship starts just about when they're born. And, even as a parent, even if the child isn't being guided, it's already coming out in that nice mother-child, father-child, but father-baby, mother-baby, I really should say, kind of relationship dance that begins and then goes and goes. So when that is lost, which it is, and it uniquely defines these children, that is a really devastating deficit for them that defines them, I think, very clearly, Lisa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's huge. Having that guiding relationship is so critical to that emotional feedback loop, to developing, the attunement, the connection, the understanding. And so I can't speak highly enough about it in terms of, it's everything. And so once you have that guiding relationship, any other childhood goal that you're trying to work on it's a lot easier, because generally speaking, we see that the child will develop a growth-seeking mindset. And I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of your slides there, but I'll just let you move on here. Go ahead.
Spoiler alert. No. But it's a really good point. And really, I had just one point to say about this, which is imagine being 2 and not having the guiding relationship. So whatever you want to call that in your life, that's what it was. And you're cut off from that. It's true that the guiding relationship can be damaged by lots of life circumstances for the parents. Okay, so I do want to point that out. My father died when I was 6 months old, and I actually grew up for a while, a very short while, but still a pretty formative time with my aunt, because my mother, it was very sudden and traumatic, and my mother was affected by that. So things happen to the guiding relationship for reasons other than autism, but in this case, the children are completely cut off from being able to have that. And that would serve for an adopted child or a child, biological child for the parents. They're cut off because of autism. Mm-hmm. So as Dr. Gutstein defines guiding, and it is important to know what guiding is affording the children countless opportunities for mental and self-growth. So we're getting to your spoiler, self-growth. If a baby is cut off from guiding, how can they have, Lisa, mental growth? How can that occur?
Well, it's nearly impossible, because the child doesn't have that motivation to want to learn about their world, and can't really fully understand how they can learn about their world through the eyes of their more trusted guide, which is generally speaking their parent. And so all those opportunities are lost, in a sense.
And that's what's
special about RDI is that I don't know another program. You were just going to say that.
Go for it, girl.
Program out there like it, because, there's other developmental relationship programs, which, have some really good qualities, but they're often child-led. And RDI is parent-led, and we're putting that education and the empowerment in the hands of the parents as God intended it, really. And that, this is the way that it's been for centuries, for hundreds and thousands of years. And this is the way that it is across all cultures, is that generally speaking, there is a more experienced guide, an expert guide that will help the child learn who they are and develop a sense of their own selves and what they can become. And it's through that relationship. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I didn't have it with my own boys prior to RDI. I didn't know what to do with them. So I was always giving them baths or taking them to the grocery store and putting them in those double wide strollers and giving them a sucker. I'm not even kidding you.
I know you're not.
Strollers. And then I had a Burley, which was like this big push stroller that also fit too. And I put them in there with their little Game Boys or whatever it was that, could occupy them. And I can't tell you, though, I was pretty fit back then because I didn't know what else to do.
You didn't know what else to do. Well, research is showing us, as we talk about our babies when they were young, that that infants who will be diagnosed with autism are not becoming growth seeking between 6 and 12 months. So what's important to know is that between 6 and 12 months, their peers, babies, start becoming growth seeking. Now, this does coincide, I doubt coincidentally, with mobility. And what they're seeing as they're processing this research is that infants who will be eventually diagnosed with autism are not becoming growth seeking. So it's really important piece of data for folks to kind of munch on in their brain, as I like to say, and what that means to the guiding relationship. So, and as Lisa and I talk about our children, we have to think about what that meant in their lives. And sometimes these are the type of things, of course, as a new parent, you're not really thinking about it in these terms. So it's really important information. So
I remember, sorry, I was just going to tell you, I remember my son being in the exerciser, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me just to bring the exerciser and put it right in the kitchen at least, because I was in there, I think, cleaning out cupboards. And he was just around the corner of it was kind of an open concept, but yet I couldn't quite see him all the time. But he was sitting in this exerciser, and I remember telling myself, okay, this might be like too good to be true, but it's odd. Go to him. Like, this is, because he was content to sit in it for, I don't even want to tell you how long. It was quite unusual. It was just strange that I had to tell myself, like, you need to go and get him out of that, because that's just not quite normal, I guess, is probably what I was thinking in my head. Like, get him out of that. It was a little tempting to leave him in it. I'm not going to lie. But, and he was probably 8 months old. So.
Well, thank you for that, because I think that really speaks to that research point. You have a living little example that happened right in front of you. But of course, that again is something for new parents that we don't know that. And honestly, as new parents, we're told, and I think rightfully so, I don't really have resentments against, is that all children are different, and so not to worry if this and that and the other milestones being met. We had our list of what autism is not. This list is just things that people observe to me about the children that are signs. I call them more signs than maybe specifically deficits, because they also, like with all the children, come out differently. But they're ones that are common for folks to talk about, which is opposition to change. But when you're thinking about growth, as we're seeing in that research, I've also seen children that it wasn't so much an opposition as to change as a lack of thought about change. Just kind of a status quo, as it were. But sometimes opposition. Difficulty with inference, so difficulty thinking about, and this starts very young in children, what the other person is thinking, even in small, tiny little ways. Flexible thinking, just creativity or time changes or those kind of things. A basic lack of resilience. And I remember that as you're thinking back about your babies, me thinking about mine, and that's what I was seeing with him, a basic lack of resilience. He just, things would happen and he would be fine. And then once he had a bad experience, he had a lack of resilience with whatever that was. So an example would be, we had our family picture taken at church, and we didn't know that this was going on at the time. And we had our picture, and the flash went off, and he started crying. And but it was a beautiful picture. I love that picture. And he really was hard to console. Well, they lost our picture, Lisa.
Oh.
And so they said, we're sorry, you're going to have to come back for the church directory picture. We went back, and he saw that camera, and there was no way to comfort him. The picture of us is with him screaming. And I realized that could happen with any baby if somebody's out there saying that, but there were lots of those kind of things. And so a lack of resilience and limited interests or in problem solving. And, I watch typically developing babies, and they get really interested in problems and trying to solve little problems like, will the blocks stay up? How do I get them to stack? And they'll try over and over again. And that connects to resilience, but there can also be a lack of interest. And there's many more. But these are kind of observations, Lisa.
I agree.
So this is where we're getting into what's the root of this, and it's kind of the way we're going to spend the last few minutes, is this time together has not been about really getting into the meat and bones of what autism is. Our purpose has been to say what it is not, because we have to change our thinking, and if I could be so bold, Lisa, to say our incorrect thinking, right? In order to get our brains turned. And I think you and I both had that experience of correcting our thinking, right?
Oh, for sure.
It was a pretty profound experience, actually.
It was. I felt like when I saw Dr. Gutstein speak, and it was the first time, was in the March of 2003, and he described what autism was. And even back then, it was based on the latest research that was available. And today, as we understand it, it's evolved that much more. It's that much more comprehensive. And Dr. Gutstein has just kept up with the research, and that's just what he does. And then he provides that information, and we put it to a clinical program, and we see the effects of that with the kids. And I think that we're both parents of kids that are in their adults. They're adults now. My baby just turned 18 in March, and I've been able to experience the effects of well over 13 years of applying RDI in his life. And it's been phenomenal to see how this has manifested itself into what Dr. Gutstein's vision was to, really improve quality of life, not only for that individual, but for the whole family. So, but yeah, what this amounts to is all of these things that you've put here. So why don't you, back over to you, Kat.
Well, and this is just a nutshell. That's why I said to name a few. But for the children not learning from their own experiences, I can remember so many parents say, this happens, and they don't seem to carry that forward into the future and learn from that experience. They do the same thing over and over again, same ineffective thing over and over again, to use their past experiences into the future, not learning from others' experiences. So it's an interesting thing when you think about it, how this just happens, Lisa, that we just learn from other people's experiences. Not everything. We don't even ever trust everybody, but we do that, especially in the guiding relationship growing up. No personal agency, no sense of self for some of the children.
And their ability to really influence their world. And so that word agency may be a little bit unfamiliar to some people, but essentially that's what it means, is the child's ability to understand how they can take measures to influence their world and experience themselves being competent.
It's just key to life. Key to life. And so, if we backed up to our list of experience change and lack of resiliency, problems of flexibility, it's no wonder, because if you don't have the experience of influencing your own life, how would those things exist?
Right.
It's key. And no drive to engage in new challenges. I am currently, not to try to use this to show off or anything, but I've been jumping up on a balance ball I have on the flip side of it, with both, and landing on it and not falling off and killing myself. That was my goal. So I've been jumping up on it. Well, I've gotten bored. So now I'm going to jump off it and jump back off of it. And then I started doing yoga poses on one foot on it. And then the latest thing I started doing on it, Lisa, was I started jumping on it and jumping off, jumping on it, jumping off. And I land on it. It's very wobbly. I land on it, land, jump off, over and over. But I realized I was challenging myself more and more, because
Yes.
I get bored with it. And I wasn't thinking about that. I was just doing it. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yes. And the interesting thing about that is that you had to know where you'd come from. You'd have to be able to have saved those prior experiences in order to be able to move forward into the future and to establish new goals. And I'm sure that you have a wealth of other prior experiences of when you were able to, it's about becoming, that developing a stronger sense of who you are and what you can do. It's a process that we all experience through our lives, and being able to develop, our sense of who we are. So you and your family have always been pretty active.
True.
And physically active, and so you're about to be a grandma and you are jumping on and off
I thought of that.
Bosu balls, right? Is it a Bosu ball? One of those like half?
Yeah, it is.
Like, that's crazy. But you know what? There's your motivation. Your motivation to do these things really stems from your prior experiences, and
It's true.
your own sense of agency and what you have developed over time. And this is the thing that we really that we understand is a universal deficit for individuals with autism. And this is one of the huge pieces of the work that we do as consultants and parents to help develop to help the children to encode those meaningful experiences so that they can make sense of them, so they can develop a sense of who they are. They can develop a self-other understanding and competency, which is the social. It's also interconnected, but at the root of it, it's all about really those experiences developing that growth-seeking mindset or motivation, intrinsic motivation, if you will.
So we enjoy talking to you about what autism is not and start the conversation about what it is. And I hope it helps to hear from two parents who've gone through this and have many, many stories